To model the hair, we're going to extrude from a copy of the scalp. In object mode, I'm going to select this side of the body and hit Command 1 to isolate it. And then in face component mode, select the faces for the scalp. Her hair comes down to here. Others might go lower or higher. Others might also have sideburns. To break this part of the body off of the main form, we need to hit two buttons. Edit Mesh, Detach, which makes it separate but still part of the same model. So we then hit Separate. And Separate, if we click away and then back on it, makes it an actual separate object. We can now hit Command D to duplicate, and we should put that duplicate into another display layer. Create a new layer, double-click. To change its name, we'll call this Hair. Hit Save and Hide. So now there is still one copy of the hair left. Select the body, select the scalp. In the Modeling Toolkit, hit Combine. Right-click for Vertex, and we can select around these vertices and use a tool called Merge, Edit Mesh Merge. By default, the threshold for merge is 0.01, which is small enough that only vertices that are practically on top of their neighbor are considered that close. And so if we merge at that very, very small distance, only those vertices get merged into a single point. Then we can reselect all of these edges and go to Mesh Display, Soften Edge, so it looks like it was never broken off. Now we can hide the body once we re-add it to the layer and bring back just the hair. If we go to the front view, the eye and the teeth can be added to the body layer, and this hair is going to be non-symmetrical. The pivot is already in the center, so we can go to Edit, Duplicate Special option box, where we previously set it to Instance and -1 scale, Duplicate Special, and we can select both of these to go to the Modeling Toolkit and combine. Select the vertices, select down the center, hit R, and we can non-uniform scale them together to make sure they're really right on top of each other. And once again, go to Edit Mesh Merge. Hit W, double-click this edge, Mesh Display, Soften, and now we have the full scalp. Before we bring back the body, now is a good time to select the entire scalp and do one short extrude. Instead of moving these arrows, try increasing the thickness. If we go back to the front view, we can see this is a bit too far out, so we can reduce the thickness a little bit to perhaps 0.15 and then hit W to commit. We can then select this entire inside and delete it. Instead of trying to select all these points, we can select just these few and then hit Shift period to increase our selection. Going to the Object mode, Edit, Duplicate Special, remove the -1 scale so it is not a mirror, and then rotate on Y -90 degrees so we can see it from the side. If we bring back the body and duplicate it as well, we can see how the hair and body look together. The next stage is about moving vertices around to try to imitate the form. I'm going to cut here to allow this to rise up a little bit. I'll bring this down. I can see it went way too far out here in the back, so I can bring all these points in. And I'm just working very roughly here in this view. I'll be more careful and more precise back in the perspective view. But this is to try to get the rough overall form. I'm going to select these edges to do a connect with only one segment so I can bring this out. And I'll select around all these edges to soften. Here I am shaping the back of the hair so it flows the way this character's hair flows. We think of the hair like sculpting mashed potatoes. We are looking for the primary forms and trying to shape the mass for those forms. Don't think of hair as individual strands. Think of it like an interestingly shaped helmet. And once we feel we have something like the rough form down, we can then look at the big clumps in our reference and extrude out those forms. And there we have a full hair form with the appearance of overlapping areas of hair that are just extruded in pull geometry. This flatter area in the back is where the strap for the goggles will go, and the goggles will cover this flatter area in the front. I'd like to enhance this shoulder to get some of the detail in the reference. And I think one more line at the bottom of the jacket, maybe two, to really push the way it breaks before it hits the cuff here at the bottom. For the final hand, we're going to want each of these joints to have at least 3 divisions so that the fingers can bend. One way to do that is to select each of these existing joint lines and use the bevel tool to expand them into 3. We go to the modeling toolkit, hit bevel, and change the segments from 1 to 2. We might increase the fraction to 0.7, so they're just a little bit more spread apart, and then hit W to complete the bevel. Then we can again select this center line and drag it up a little bit. And then for each of these outer lines, we can, in the top view, move them away from that center line So there's a slight angle. And in the bottom, we can move them a little bit closer together. Orbit around, and that looks pretty good. And then we select these lines, go to Mesh Display, Soften Edge. Okay, let's make the scarf. We'll start like with the face, with the Create Polygon tool under Mesh Tools, so that we can trace the basic shape using as few vertices as we can so that we don't have too much to manipulate if we want to change the proportions. The scarf will be a separate object, in part because of the non-symmetry, but also just to make it easy to animate separately if we desire. Right-click for Vertex Component Mode, hit W, and move the vertices into place. Spacebar our way to the perspective view, and you can see that the normals are reversed, just as they were with the face. The gray is on the wrong side. So we can go to Mesh Display and reverse the normals. Now we want this form to curve around her neck, and so we can draw lines that can then be used to bend the form as the scarf should be. Hitting F makes our object the center of the orbit, making it easier to work. And hitting Return after each multi-cut finishes that cut and makes the next one ready to go. Back here in the front view, we can continue to define the form. And of course, in the end, we want to have quads. Now that the form has been drawn, we can go back to the channel box and the display menu and bring back the body. Pivot for the scarf is down here. It would be easier if it was centered in the object. So we go to Modify, Center Pivot, drag it forward. If we want, we can get rid of the history so far. And while we're at it, we should also do that for the nice big history on the body. And if there's any left on the hair, Edit, Delete by Type, History. Now I don't want to move this scarf up or down or side to side because it's in the right position in those dimensions, but I could move it forward and back. Selecting all of the vertices of this particular branch of the scarf, I can drag this forward and rotate it. This scarf form is going to be extruded. It's not going to be just 2D. Although we could leave it 2D, I like to have a bit more volume in my forms. Drag this back. Remember, this is going to be extruded, so I don't actually need this side to be completely outside of the mesh, because the extrusion certainly will be. Selecting the front, selecting the other side. Here's a vertex I forgot to deselect, easy to put back. I don't want to lift it too much because it was in the right position, but I could lift it a little bit. And then push these vertices back. Now to complete the back of the scarf, we can select those edges, hit extrude, pull them out a little bit, and then hit W to pull them out a lot. Drag them up and scale them together. And then bridge them. We can select this hole and go to Mesh, Fill Hole. Then with these edges selected, we can hit Connect, perhaps with 3 lines. Pull it back a little bit. This can be moved forward and rotated and even pulled out a little bit to more closely hug the contour of the neck. And we can take the one on the side, pull it in. This is all move and rotate. Now that we have the fitted form, we can select all of the faces and do an extrude. Thickness, here using the extrude tool, and we can give it just a little bit of offset, perhaps 0.05. I'm redefining the knot that the scarf gets tied into, this round shape here in the center, and then that will get another extrude. So now to distinguish between these sides of the scarf, the branches and the knot, we're going to extrude the knot and the branches where they come off of the main body of the scarf, extruding this detail outward. Scale it in a little bit, and then deselect the branches. And because the knot is meant to be on top, we extrude the knot again. We want this transition to be smooth. Target weld these vertices back in. And then in object mode, we can soften the edges. And then harden the lines that are meant to show the distinct forms. Work should be done to smooth these edge loops and create cleaner curves. But that is essentially a way to create this new form. We have a lot of history. Edit, delete by type history, save, and file, save scene as, the next number up. We can select our scarf and put it in a new layer so it can be hidden. Now let's make the goggles. Once again, we go to Mesh Tools for Create Polygon, and with as few clicks as possible, define the form so it can be extruded. Modify Center Pivot. Select the vertices and rotate. And in object mode, move it forward and bring back the body and the hair. Make sure that it's sitting on top of the hair. You can select half the vertices to rotate that way, and the other half to rotate opposite. And now we can start to cut these cross lines and then build the lenses. Going to the modeling toolkit, we can use multi-cut to cut across the form. And we can backspace away any of the extra vertices. Next, we can start to cut in these lenses. Selecting the entire form, we can extrude. Selecting just the lenses, we can extrude again. With a very small offset so we don't get a 90-degree angle. Modify center pivot, mesh display, soften edge, select the inside edges and hardened edge. By stretching this form, we can make it appear as if the strap goes into her hair. And then we could build a strap here in the back of her hair. In the object mode, edit, delete by type history on the selected mesh. And now we can do a new mesh tools, create polygon. 7 clicks on the top, 7 clicks on the bottom. I'm just making sure I have an odd number so I can have a line down the middle. Connect, 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 connect. Drag these out, and this for a rough approximation. In object mode, we can reverse it, modify center pivot, drag it over, hide the reference, rotate it 180 degrees on Y, drag it into place, adjust, and extrude. And there we have the full Amelia Earhart model.